after year under Joe Biden. It's impossible. Mr. Speaker, it is impossible to see that as genuine. What I see is a group more focused on scoring political points and drama than on protecting abused children. The record is clear. Under Republicans, far more information has been released in the last 6 months than was done during all 4 years of the previous presidency under Joe Biden. We've actually been the party of transparency. We've released the information. We've told the truth. Unfortunately, and I'm sad to say it, they have been the party of hypocrisy. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
You know, I've never heard a more defensive presentation in my life than what we're hearing from over there. The gentleman should spend a little less time pointing out hypocrisy and a little more time trying to ferret out cruelty, humiliation, and rape. And that's what we're working on. I yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Min.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
I want to remind you that we are all here voting on this bill because President Trump, who has the power to release the Epstein files at any time, has refused to do so, calling this a hoax. We're here because Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump have gone to extraordinary lengths to try to kill and delay the discharge petition, including refusing to seat Adelita Grijalva for over 40 days and threatening House Republicans who signed on. Now, several of my Republican colleagues have accused those of us House Democrats who support justice here of having Trump derangement syndrome. You all suffer from something much worse, which is pedophile protection syndrome. Stop protecting pedophiles. Release the Epstein files. The victims deserve justice. I yield back.
We reserve.
Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair.
No kidding.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
I'm yielding 30 seconds to my friend, Representative Walkinshaw from Virginia.
The gentleman is recognized.
For years, Mr. Speaker, we have watched dangerous conspiracies like Pizzagate and QAnon shape our political landscape. They help fuel the rise of President Trump and were built on baseless claims about secret pedophile rings, while the real documented case of child sex trafficking involving Jeffrey Epstein remains shrouded in secrecy because President Trump refuses to release the files. What is President Trump hiding? Why won't he release the files? The House finally has the opportunity to act, release the files, and let the American people see the truth. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
We reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Granting 30 seconds to the very distinguished gentlelady who is finally with us, Representative Adelita Grijalva from Arizona 7th.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge the survivors, family members, and advocates who are here today and have never given up. The legislation in front of us, at its core, is about something very simple. The survivors deserve justice. The American people deserve the truth. To every survivor watching, your courage is inspiring. You are the reason why this vote is happening today. Protecting women and children from pedophiles should not be a Democratic issue, should not be a Republican issue. It should be a human rights issue and a matter of justice. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, and we reserve.
The chair will remind all persons in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that any manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings is in violation of the rules of the House. The gentleman from Maryland.
Yeah, but I'll just add, they're here as honored guests of the House, and we're delighted they're here, and with that, we reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, we reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
I'm granting 30 seconds to Representative Lois Frankel from Florida.
The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, for far too long, the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse were failed by a justice system that minimized their suffering and prosecutors who treated young girls as if they were criminals. That was wrong, and I am here with my colleagues to promise this. We will get to the bottom of why the Epstein survivors were treated so badly, who made those decisions, and who were they protecting. No more secrecy, no more excuses. We all deserve the truth, and I thank the survivors for their courage and perseverance. Your voices are being heard.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman
We reserve.
Reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Mr.
The gentleman
Johnson.
from Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, for doing such an extraordinary job on all of this. For 43 long days, the Democrats held this House and the entire country hostage. Finally, with the lights back on, this body's returning to our regular legislative session. We have a lot of work to do. My colleagues on this side of the chamber are ready and eager to get back to our urgent legislative work that we promised the American people we would do. We've got to continue lowering the cost of health care. We've got to bring down prices for American families, and we've got to finish the regular appropriations process, just to name a few of those priorities. And I wish I could say that our first order of business would be to get to those urgent priorities, but of course we're here spending time on the floor about something else. This is something we could have resolved last week when we brought a unanimous consent to pass this discharge with the full support of the body. But our friends over here who are arguing today stalled that. They objected to it, and they wanted to have this exercise instead. And that's why we say that this is a show vote. That's what this is. They're making a show of it. And it really is a shame. We have some heroic women in the chamber today. I met with many of them a while back. They're in the gallery here. They have come forward. They have shown their faces. They've used their names to share the unspeakable tragedies that many of them were subjected to, some of them when they were very young. And it is a heroic service to the country. They are seeking justice, and the justice has been delayed for too long. The Department of Justice, many years ago, should have brought these charges. It took too long to do it. And now we're in this process of making sure all the American people get the information, but we have to do it in the right way, After 4 years of Democrat control under President Biden, they were not truthful with us about a lot of things. The Democrats insisted the border was secure. We knew it wasn't. They insisted that inflation was transitory. We knew it wouldn't be. They misled the American people about the obvious mental and physical decline of the previous commander-in-chief. And now those same Democrats are demanding transparency. Suddenly, transparency is their new word. Out of nowhere, they've taken a curious concern in the Epstein investigation, all in the name of that, in the name of transparency. But the question has been asked here many times during the debate on the floor, and everybody questioning why it is that Democrats have done this right now have to look at the obvious facts. The Democrats had all the Epstein files in their possession for 4 long years under the Biden presidency. The Biden Department of Justice had these files, and no one on this side who is breathless today about the urgency of this release ever said a word about it. And it was the Democrats who could have urged President Biden's Department of Justice to go beyond prosecuting just Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, but they didn't do it. And so it's a fair question to ask today, why now? Why the sudden urgent interest in Jeffrey Epstein? Look, we know why. It's because the Democrats were never interested in transparency or executing justice or protecting the victims of this unspeakable tragedy before. The simple truth is obvious for everybody to see. This is a political exercise for Democrats, and it pains me to say it. I wish that was not the truth, but it is, and it's undeniable. This is as deceitful and dishonest as their pointless stunt was to shut the government down. Democrats are using the Epstein tragedy, the unspeakable evils that this guy committed with his trafficking ring and all of the abuses that they made these young women go through. They're using that as a political weapon to try to distract from their failures as a party and to try their best to try to tie President Trump somehow into this wretched scandal. The president had nothing to do with it. He's been very clear, and he has nothing to hide, and that's why he's endorsed the vote today. I suspect this vote will be probably unanimous. But here's the important point that everybody needs to understand. We have been advocates of maximum transparency, but we have also insisted that the victims be carefully protected. The Oversight Committee has been doing extraordinary work, and we've got some of the most vigorous advocates on the Republican and Democrat side on the Oversight Committee. They've been working in earnest to deliver transparency for the American people and to do it in a responsible manner. What do we mean by that? The bipartisan effort over there is already producing all the results that the discharge petition seeks and much, much more. Chairman Comer and all of these advocates over there have been releasing thousands of documents, for example, from the Epstein estate. And by the way, in my view, that's been the greatest treasure trove of information because it's yielded for us Epstein's own personal flight logs, his financial records, his daily calendars, and so much more. But importantly, none of that was addressed or is addressed in the legislation that's being voted on today. The estate files wouldn't even have been encompassed in that. And so it goes to show that the Oversight Committee is doing it from the right way. From the very beginning, we've been insistent that this matter be handled carefully and with the utmost caution and care for the people who have been harmed. They should not be made to suffer any longer. We're talking about real people's lives at stake here, and young victims who don't want to be dragged into this political game that could get hurt further. But the Democrats are rushing the release of thousands of unsubstantiated documents that may be included in this, that are going to be in the public domain with the passage of this bill. And there are serious deficiencies in the legislation that I have noted at length, and Republicans have to work to address those deficiencies in the Senate if and when this legislation is advanced. I stood before the American public today at our press conference, and I explained in detail the dangers of the discharge petition. We have posted at my website, speaker.gov, a summary. The legal counsel, a small army of lawyers, put this together. I used to be a federal court litigator. Many of my colleagues who have spoken today were. We understand the dangers of how this was haphazardly drawn up. And among them, by the way, Mr. Speaker, before I forget, I seek unanimous consent to enter into this document into the record. It's on the website. It's entitled, How the Flaws of H.R. 4405 Could Re-Victimize Epstein's Victims, Create New Victims, and Damage the Judicial System. It is dated today. Thank you. And it summarizes just 5 or 6 of the major concerns. Among them, it fails to fully protect victim privacy. It could create new categories of victims. It potentially jeopardizes grand jury secrecy. It fails to prohibit release of child sexual abuse materials that are not appropriately defined in the legislation. It jeopardizes future federal investigations, and we have national security concerns regarding classified information. We'll put this in the record because we need the legislative record to reflect what is the legislative intent behind this vote. I used to litigate cases. We would litigate federal statutes and whether or not they could survive, and legislative intent is important. And we need to say clearly for the record, as a Speaker of the House, I'm saying to you, this legislation that will pass today is flawed and it must be amended. The question is, why didn't we amend it here before we passed it? Because the authors won't allow it. Because under the rules of the House, under a discharge petition, they have to agree to consent for the legislation to be amended, and they're not doing that. So now we rely upon our partners in the other chamber to get that done, and they need to do that. The victims deserve our utmost respect. In fact, they should be saluted for their courage. And the young women who have not come forward, who are now, some of them are middle-aged women who have not come forward, also deserve our respect, and they deserve to be protected. Republicans support transparency. We want maximum transparency, especially when it comes to disclosing the names of anybody who had anything to do with these evils, anybody who conspired with or aided in any way Jeffrey Epstein. They must be brought to justice. We want the bill to be amended so it doesn't, at the same time, violate victim privacy, create new victims, disclose the names of any whistleblower or informant, cause the release of grand jury materials or child sexual abuse materials, or undermine our national security. And if and when the Senate takes this up, we will work with our colleagues over there to make sure that these things are corrected. I'll just close with this simple thought. We've been at this a while. It's drug on for a while, but it's time for this to come to light. I expect that this will be a unanimous vote, and it will reflect what I think every member in this chamber, and I'll say this now, at least in recent days, every member of the chamber on the Democrat side, they didn't say anything for 4 years, but they're for maximum transparency now, and so is this side. But we want to do it in a respectful and careful manner so that we don't subject innocent people to further harm. And that has been the whole thing. I told all my members today I'll be voting yes on this, and I suspect almost everyone will. We'll send it to the Senate, and we hope it's corrected. Thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I'm yielding to Mr. Gomez for the sole purpose of making a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Gomez is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask a point of parliamentary inquiry. Is this an appropriate time to point out that the Republicans named children's savings account in their so-called one big beautiful bill after Donald Trump, someone connected to one of the most notorious pedophiles in this country, or that the Speaker of the House just lied on the floor by stating that there was protection, there isn't protections for the victims in the Epstein bill.
The gentleman is no longer recognized. The gentleman from Maryland, you are recognized.
Thank you. I am prepared to close. I've got no more speakers on my side.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, no.
Gentleman from Ohio has 30 seconds.
If you could, can I inquire how much time is remaining?
30 seconds. Six minutes, 15 seconds.
Take 30 his.
We reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I'll take the opportunity of the Speaker's presence to respond to some of the things that he said. In the very presence of the victims and the survivors who come to join us today, the Speaker said that now would be a time we should be working on urgent legislative work. Mr. Speaker, justice is urgent legislative work. The truth is urgent legislative work. The Speaker says, why now? Why now? Well, Mr. Speaker, you were the one who refused to swear in Adelita Grijalva for 50 days. We would have done it 50 days ago, but she provided the 218th signature on the discharge petition. So why now? It was because of your dilatory tactics, your delay, your postponement of it. Now, the gentleman says that there are not sufficient protections. There are protections in the bill for the victims to make sure that their names will be redacted. And yet we hear even the Speaker of the House of Representatives openly inviting the U.S. Senate to start finger painting on this bill, which we have waited more than 5 months to bring to the floor. The Senate should pass the bill exactly as it's written. The President should sign it exactly as he said he would when he finally changed his mind. And the Epstein file must be released. Moreover, if the President is serious about what he's saying, he's got the power to release the Epstein file right now. Nobody's stopping him. It's within his possession. It's within his control. He can release the whole thing, and he can redact the names of the victims and others who are innocent in this process. Mr. Speaker, Speaker Johnson said that these are unspeakable evils. Well, because of the bravery and the invincible courage of the women who've joined us today, they're no longer unspeakable. They're spoken. They're articulated. The cat is out of the bag, and we know what's been going on for decades. It's been a double standard of justice, going all the way back to Alex Acosta, who later got rewarded with a cabinet appointment in the Trump administration. Alex Acosta had a 60-count federal indictment ready to go against all kinds of people for an interstate sex trafficking conspiracy with solicitation, with child sex abuse, all of it. And he traded that 60-count federal indictment for 1 count in state court. And Jeffrey Epstein ended up getting the sweetest of sweetheart deals ever on the plea bargain front. He was free from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to do whatever he wanted and continuing to perpetrate his crimes and run his conspiracy. And then he would come and he would watch TV and spend the night in jail. And it was over in about a year after the rape and sexual abuse of hundreds and hundreds of girls. And he kept going and he kept at it. We want the whole truth to come out. This is the United States of America. Even the British monarchy wouldn't put up with this. How about the American democracy? How about we say, no way, we're not going to allow this cover-up to go on for 1 day more. And I'm glad the President changed his mind after pulling out all the stops to try to get one of our Republican colleagues to change their mind, to remove their name from the discharge petition. He gave up. And I want to salute the gentlelady from Colorado from having the courage to stand her ground in the Situation Room in the White House and say, no, she wasn't going to be bullied. No. So I'm glad the President changed his mind. But let's be clear, Mr. President, you've got the power today to release the entire file. That's what you called for. That's what Pam Bondi called for. That's what Kash Patel called for. So we don't need anybody calling for the Senate to slow things down for more weeks and more months. The American people have had it. We'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is reminded to direct your comments to the chair and not your colleagues. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized, and you do have 90 seconds remaining. Correction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
The Democrat Party, with help from the dishonest media, used the Epstein files not to seek justice from the victims, but to smear President Trump. And it's sickening, quite sickening. The Democrats have used the Epstein files to distract the American people from the wins President Trump and his administration have delivered for the American people for the last 11 months. I'm proud to work with my Republican colleagues on the House Oversight Committee in coordination with the Justice Department. 65,000 pages of documents are related from Epstein released. What have my Democrat colleagues done? They selectively leaked and altered documents to mislead the American people. As President Trump has stated, we have nothing to hide here. I'm voting to release the files so that we can move on from this smear campaign the Democrats have manufactured. God bless
Gentleman's
Donald J.
time has
Trump.
expired. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
All right. How much time do I have to close?
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank all of America for tuning in to this. I want to thank Representatives Massey and Khanna, Representative Green, all of those who have insisted upon bringing the truth forward and a reckoning with the reality of one of the worst international child sex trafficking rings ever to exist in the United States and the cover-up attendant to it. We've got the opportunity today to do justice for the victims, for the survivors who have come forward to say that the voice of the victims and the survivors must be put at the very center of our deliberations, not shunted off to the side, not submerged, not subordinated, but put at the very center. We must hear from the people who themselves were victimized by this nightmare. Now, our colleagues across the aisle seem to want to make this into some sort of partisan contest. I haven't heard so much talk about the Democrats since the Democratic National Convention. And all that we've done here is to say we want to bring the truth forward, along with a bipartisan group. We don't want the Senate monkeying around with this in order to slow things down. We want it passed in the Senate. We want it signed. And before that, if the president is true to his word and he wants to see all of this come to light, he can release it now instead of fighting, kicking, and screaming every step along the way. But I'm glad he's changed his mind, and I hope he maintains the momentum he's got to stick with the vast majority of the American people who want to see that the truth is done here. And while he's at it, the administration could reconsider their terrible policies gutting federal offices and programs designed to combat violence against women. The DOJ terminated hundreds of grants to police departments, defunding the police when it comes to investigating violent sex crimes and to support victims. His DOJ destroyed programs to combat international human trafficking rings. Let's get back on the side of the women. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker Johnson said it right. Why now after 4 years of doing nothing? Because going after President Trump is an obsession with these guys. Best example is John Brennan testified in front of our committee under oath, said he was not involved with the dossier. Only problem is Tulsi Gabbard declassified a report, released that report, and it said exactly the opposite. And she related a story in there where a CIA official went up to Mr. Brennan and said, we shouldn't include this in the report. And John Brennan's response was, yeah, but doesn't it ring true? Forget the facts, forget the truth, go after Trump, put it in. Same dynamic at work here. We're all for protecting innocent victims. We're all for exposing the bad guys who did bad things. But this is an obsession with the left. For 10 years, it's going after President Trump. So vote yes. Make sure the bad guys are held accountable. We all want to do that. Speaker Johnson's right. I think it's going to be unanimous. But understand what they're doing, because they had 4 years and didn't do a darn thing. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 4405? Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without
Can I request
objection,
a recorded vote, Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Yeah, I'm requesting a recorded vote.
The gentleman from Maryland has requested a recorded vote. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion to suspend the rules will be followed by 5-minute votes on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 879, adoption of House Resolution 879 if ordered, and adoption of House Resolution 878. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 427, the nays are 1. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 879, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 47, House Resolution 879. Resolution providing for consideration of the joint resolution, Senate Joint Resolution 80, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska Integrated Activity Plan Record of Decision, providing for consideration of the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 130, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Buffalo Field Office Record of Decision and approved Resource Management Plan Amendment, providing for consideration of the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 131, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Coastal Plain Oil and Gas Leasing Program Record of Decision, providing for consideration of the concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 58, denouncing the horrors of socialism, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 1949, to repeal restrictions on the export of import of natural gas, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 3109, to require the Secretary of Energy to direct the National Petroleum Council to issue a report with respect to the petrochemical refineries in the United States and for other purposes, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 5107, to repeal the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Amendment Act of 2022, enacted by the District of Columbia Council, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 5214, to require mandatory pretrial and post-conviction detention for crimes of violence and dangerous crimes and require mandatory cash bail for certain offenses that pose a threat to the public safety or order in the District of Columbia, and for other purposes,
The question is on ordering the previous question. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 217, the nays are 211. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Speaker,
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. The House will be in order. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
To speak out of order for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to recognize a man whose dedication, steadiness, and wisdom have shaped not only my work in this chamber, but the work of this institution itself. I'm talking about my Chief of Staff, Brett Horton. There are few people who know Capitol Hill more intimately than Brett. For 15 years...
Gentlemen will suspend. The House will be in order. Gentleman's
For
recognized.
15 years, he's been by my side. He began as my counsel in 2010 and worked his way through some of the most demanding, consequential roles in the House. Policy Director at the Republican Study Committee, Floor Director in the Majority Whip's office, and for the last decade, my Chief of Staff in both the Whip's office and the Leader's office. To me and to countless members of Congress and staff, Brett Horton has been far more than a colleague. He's been a trusted advisor, steady in his approach, wise in his counsel, and deliberate in his words and actions. When the stakes were the highest, Brett's voice was the one you wanted in the room. His fingerprints are on every major Republican policy victory we've achieved in the past decade. But perhaps more importantly, he's been by my side through tough personal and professional challenges that extend far beyond legislating. In the aftermath of the congressional baseball shooting, an event that shook my family, my staff, and this entire conference in Congress, Brett's leadership and friendship were unwavering. He helped carry us through one of the most difficult and unprecedented challenges we ever faced. Mr. Speaker, public service at this level demands trust, character, and unwavering duty for the institution that is this United States Congress. Brett Horton embodies all of these qualities. I'm profoundly grateful for his years of service to me personally, to this House, and to our country. As Brett begins his next chapter, I have no doubt he'll continue to serve with the same excellence that has defined his entire career. The United States House of Representatives is the stronger institution because of Brett Horton's distinguished service here. I wish Brett all the best in his future endeavors, and I tell you, thank you, Brett, for your personal friendship and for your service to this great United States of America and this great Congress. Thank you, Brett Horton.
Gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the adoption of House Resolution 879, on which a recorded vote is ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
Calendar number 47, House Resolution 879. Resolution providing for consideration of the joint resolution, Senate Joint Resolution 80, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska Integrated Activity Plan Record of Decision, providing for consideration of the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 130, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Buffalo Field Office Record of Decision and approved Resource Management Plan Amendment, providing for consideration of the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 131, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Coastal Plain Oil and Gas Leasing Program Record of Decision, providing for consideration of the concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 58, denouncing the horrors of socialism, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 1949, to repeal restrictions on the export and import of natural gas, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 3109, to require the Secretary of Energy to direct the National Petroleum Council to issue a report with respect to the petrochemical refineries in the United States and for other purposes, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 5107, to repeal the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Amendment Act of 2022, enacted by the District of Columbia Council, providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 5214, to require mandatory pre-trial and post-conviction detention for crimes of violence and dangerous crimes, and require mandatory cash bail for certain offenses that pose a threat to the public safety or order in the District of Columbia, and for other purposes and for other purposes.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 217 and the nays are 210. The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on adoption of House Resolution 878, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 878, resolution disapproving the behavior of Representative Jesus G. Chuy Garcia of Illinois.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 236, the nays are 183, with 4 answering present. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privilege of the House.
The gentleman is recognized. Just a moment. Members of the House will come to order. Chair would ask members to please take conversations off the floor. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, my House Resolution 888, censoring and condemning Delegate Stacey Plaskett and removing her from the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence for conduct that reflects the discredibility on the House of Representatives for colluding with convicted felon and offender Jeffrey Epstein during a congressional hearing. Whereas Stacey Plaskett, the delegate representing the United States Virgin Islands in the House of Representatives, inappropriately coordinated in real time with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in a congressional hearing in February of 2019. Whereas Delegate Plaskett was actively coached by Epstein during the hearing, receiving instructions on specific lines of questioning, and was congratulated after the message by Mr. Epstein, good work. Whereas Jeffrey Epstein, the Speaker of the House is not in order.
The gentleman has the floor. The chair would again ask the body to please observe decorum and keep conversations to a minimum. The gentleman has the floor.
Whereas Jeffrey Epstein was a known convicted felony sex offender, having pled guilty and been convicted for procuring a child for prostitution and solicitation, a proselyte in a plea deal in 2008, and served a 13-month prison sentence. Whereas in the course of that investigation, the FBI compiled reports on dozens of confirmed minors who credibly alleged sexual abuse by Mr. Epstein. Whereas Epstein was under further federal investigation beginning in November of 2018, 2 months before Delegate Plaskett's recently revealed text exchange during a congressional hearing, following investigative reporting by the Miami Herald detailing Epstein's controversial 2008 plea deal and highlighting accounts of his victims. Whereas Epstein was arrested in July of 2019 and charged with 1 count of sex trafficking of minors and 1 count of conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors, he was later found dead in the New York Metropolitan Correctional Center. Whereas according to documents released from Epstein's estate during a House Committee on Oversight and Reform hearing featuring testimony from Michael Cohen, the disgraced former attorney for President Donald J. Trump, Delegate Plaskett coordinated her line of questioning with Jeffrey Epstein in real time over text messages while the hearing was underway. Whereas Delegate Plaskett, who previously served as an Assistant Attorney General in the United States Department of Justice Civil Division, is known to have had extensive political, personal, and professional connections with Epstein after his conviction as a sex offender up to the time of his arrest and then his death in 2019. Whereas Delegate Plaskett's relationship with Epstein stands in stark contrast to the public image that she has curated for herself as a defender of justice and accountability, and while secretly collaborating with an individual whose crimes against vulnerable women and children shocked the entire nation. Whereas Delegate Plaskett's willingness to receive instructions on official congressional proceedings from Epstein, a convicted felony sex offender with deep concerning international associations, is especially alarming and inappropriate given her own past service in the United States Department of Justice and her current role on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and raises serious questions about Delegate Plaskett's judgment, her integrity, and her fitness to serve. Whereas such associations erode public trust in Congress, particularly when they involve using input from a sex offender to advance partisan attacks during official proceedings. Now, therefore, be it resolved, Section 1, censure of Delegate Stacey Plaskett. Resolved that the House of Representatives censors and condemns Delegate Stacey Plaskett for inappropriate coordination with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein during a congressional hearing which reflects discreditably on the House of Representatives, and directs the Committee on Ethics to conduct a full investigation to the extent of Plaskett's ties to Epstein and any further improprieties. Section 2, remove from House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. The following named member be and is hereby removed from the following committee on the House of Representatives. Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Ms. Plaskett.
Chair will now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina to offer the resolution just noticed. Does the gentleman from South Carolina offer the resolution?
I do.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 888. Whereas Stacey Plaskett, the delegate representing the United States Virgin Islands in the House of Representatives, inappropriately coordinated with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in a congressional hearing in February 2019. Whereas Delegate Plaskett was actively coached by Epstein during the hearing, received instructions on specific lines of questioning, and was congratulated afterwards with the message, "Good work." Whereas Jeffrey Epstein was a known convicted felony sex offender, having pled guilty and been convicted for procuring a child for prostitution and for soliciting a prostitute in a plea deal in 2008 and served a 13-month sentence. Whereas in the course of that investigation, the FBI compiled reports on dozens of confirmed minors who credibly alleged sexual abuse by Epstein. Whereas Epstein was under further federal investigation beginning November 2018, 2 months before Delegate Plaskett's recently revealed text exchange during a congressional hearing, following investigative reporting by the Miami Herald detailing Epstein's controversial 2008 plea deal and highlighting accounts of his victims. Whereas Epstein was arrested in July 2019 and charged with 1 count of sex trafficking of minors and 1 count of conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors, and he was later found dead in the New York Metropolitan Correctional Center. Whereas according to documents released from Epstein's estate, during a House Committee on Oversight and Reform hearing featuring testimony from Michael Cohen, disgraced former attorney to President Donald J. Trump, Delegate Plaskett coordinated her line of questioning with Jeffrey Epstein in real time over text message while the hearing was underway. Whereas Delegate Plaskett, who previously served as an Assistant Attorney General in the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Division, is known to have had extensive political, personal, and professional connections with Epstein after his conviction as a sex offender up to the time of his arrest and then death in 2019. Whereas Delegate Plaskett's relationship with Epstein stands in stark contrast to the public image she has curated for herself as a defender of justice and accountability, while secretly collaborating with an individual whose crimes against vulnerable women and children shocked the nation. Whereas Delegate Plaskett's willingness to receive instructions on official congressional proceedings from Epstein, a convicted felony sex offender with deeply concerning international associations, is especially alarming and inappropriate given her own past service in the U.S. Department of Justice and her current role on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and raises serious questions about Delegate Plaskett's judgment, integrity, and fitness to serve. And whereas such associations erode public trust in Congress, particularly when this involves using input from a sex offender to advance partisan attacks during official proceedings, now therefore be it resolved. Section 1, censure of Delegate Stacey Plaskett. The House of Representatives, 1, censures and condemns Delegate Stacey Plaskett for inappropriate coordination with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein during a congressional hearing, which reflects discreditably on the House of Representatives, and 2, directs the Committee on Ethics to conduct a full investigation into the extent of Plaskett's ties to Epstein and any potential further improprieties. Section 2, removal from House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. The following named member be and is hereby removed from the following committee of the House of Representatives. Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Ms. Plaskett.
The resolution qualifies. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Ms. Clark of Massachusetts moves to refer the resolution to the Committee on Ethics.
The gentlelady from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, today we have finally taken a vote that recognizes the need for the survivors and victims of Jeffrey Epstein to have justice and transparency. And not minutes later, the gentleman from South Carolina is filing yet another partisan resolution. I ask all of my colleagues to support this motion to refer this to the Ethics Committee, and I yield back my time.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion to refer. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
And the motion is not up. What
Mr.
purpose?
Speaker, I request to call the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. 5 minutes will be allowed for this vote. On this vote, the ayes are 213 and the noes are 214. The motion is not adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 2 of Rule 9, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And just a moment. The chair would ask the House to come to order again, ask members to take conversations off the floor so that the members can be given due accord and respect during the period of debate. The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today because the House of Representatives has a responsibility and a duty to protect the integrity of this institution. And what we learned from the documents released by Jeffrey Epstein's estate is nothing short of alarming. Those documents show that Delegate Stacey Plaskett, a sitting member of Congress, coordinated her questioning during an official oversight hearing with a man who is a convicted sex offender, a man whose crimes against minors shocked this entire nation. Let me be clear, this was just not casual contact. There were deliberate communications, and they shaped her official line of questioning in a congressional hearing. The American people expect honesty, the American people expect integrity and judgment from their elected officials. They expect members of Congress to conduct themselves with one word: decency, not to seek advice from a predator who exploited minor children. This resolution does not accuse. It acknowledges what is documented. It censures Delegate Plaskett for her conduct, removes her from the Intelligence Committee, where her judgment is paramount, and directs a full investigation into the extent of her relationship with Mr. Epstein. Some will try to spin this as politics, but protecting the honor of this body is not partisan. It's not Democrat, it's not Republican. Standing against a convicted predator's influence in our proceedings is not partisan. It's basic decency. We cannot pretend this didn't happen. The American people deserve better. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
And I rise in opposition to this resolution. We're here today on the floor to support the complete disclosure of information related to Jeffrey Epstein and his billion-dollar international child sex trafficking ring. And our side of the aisle, at least, supports the release of information relating to anybody who had anything to do with it, whether they're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or what have you, period. We insist on complete, full disclosure. This resolution has nothing to do with that. This seems to me to be one more pathetic effort to distract and divert attention from the fact that the president's name appeared more than 1,000 times already in the small fraction of material released on Epstein, and from the failure of the majority to move to disclose this information. And it is this bipartisan group that we've had behind the discharge resolution which has insisted on bringing this to the fore, and we've got nothing but obstruction, opposition, resistance, evasion, distraction, and diversion from the other side. And now we get one more resolution like this. The resolution actually proposes a disciplinary censure against Representative Stacey Plaskett, but amazingly alleges no misconduct. It does not allege the violation of the Constitution. It does not allege the violation of a federal law or a state law or local law. It does not even allege a violation of the ethics rules of the House of Representatives, and yet they want to censure her and throw her off of her committee. This, a distinguished former federal prosecutor, diligent public servant, representative of the people of the Virgin Islands. Now, Criminal justice has two parts to it. One is insisting upon legal accountability for people who do wrong. The other part of it is due process, which may be the two most beautiful words in the English language, certainly the two most beautiful words in the Constitution of the United States. It's due process that protects all of our freedoms and our rights against the arbitrary power of government and the will just to punish somebody without any process at all. But that's exactly what's going on here. Think about it. Ghislaine Maxwell had due process. She had a right to counsel. She had a right to hearing. She had a right to hear the evidence against her. She had a right to put on her case. She had a right to cross-examine. She had a right to a neutral, impartial tribunal. She had a right to unanimous verdict of a jury. And all of that she had, and she was found guilty. And that's why she was sentenced to jail for 20 years, even though Donald Trump has transferred her from a real prison to a prison camp where she's gotten very special pampered treatment, like she's in a Trump hotel. She gets room service to her cell. She gets gym privileges other inmates don't get. She gets to use the warden as a go-between with people outside of the institution and so on. But in any event, she had due process. Donald Trump had due process. He was convicted on 34 felonies, but he had the right to counsel. He had the presumption of innocence. He had a unanimous jury trial right. They had a right to cross-examine everybody, put their own witnesses on. Now, they want to take a former United States prosecutor, the representative of the people of the Virgin Islands, and without even going to the ethics committee, much less a court, they want to arraign her on some charges based on a newspaper article that she did something lawful. However ill-advised it may have been, she took a phone call from one of her constituents. Now, I don't think it is the position of the very distinguished gentleman that if we find Jeffrey Epstein on the phone with Donald Trump, he should be impeached for it, or is that his position? Is his position that any time Jeffrey Epstein got somebody on the phone, and he got a lot of people on the phone, that person is suddenly guilty? That sounds like guilt by association. That sounds like collective guilt. Our minority whip introduced a perfectly reasonable amendment to say, let's refer this to an ethics committee. Let's have a real hearing. They didn't want to have a real hearing. They want to rush to judgment. Why? So there can be some headline that will please Donald Trump tomorrow instead of a unanimous statement, or forgive me, I think the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana may have dissented, but an otherwise unanimous verdict of the House of Representatives that the American people want all the files open. We've had enough of the cover-up. We want all of the truth. We want the survivors and the victims to have the possibility of accountability. Well, they want to give them another headline, which is that they've arraigned a Democratic member for taking a phone call from her constituent, Jeffrey Epstein, in the middle of a hearing. And of course, I don't think there's any rule here against taking phone calls in a hearing. Now, if you want to actually give her the chance to explain what happened, then we would take it to the ethics committee. I still don't see what the charge is. Where is the ethical transgression? Where is the legal transgression? Are you saying anybody on your side of the aisle who had a phone call with Jeffrey Epstein should be censured? Be careful your answer there, because there's a lot more that's about to come out, right? So you should think about what is the principle behind this rush to judgment. I want to close just with this thought, because I know there were a lot of people in the chamber who were here when this happened, and a lot who weren't. There was a move to expel George Santos, who was a Republican member of the House from New York. And it was the same kind of rush to judgment, absolute political frenzy. And I looked at it for about 60 seconds. And then, I was a professor of constitutional law, so call me a legal nerd. But I said, wait, this guy's not been convicted of anything. Well, he's a Republican. Yeah, I know he's a Republican. He was not convicted in criminal court. To my knowledge, he had not been arraigned yet or convicted of anything in the ethics disciplinary process. They just said, well, there's bad press. We want to get rid of him. Beware of what you wish for. Is that the rule that you want here in the House of Representatives? That you can just draw up a member of Congress in 24 hours or 48 hours because there's a bad newspaper article without asking any questions, without giving that person any due process at all? Is that what it's come to at this point? I mean, all we're asking for in the Epstein files is release the materials so we can check it out. They want to go ahead and censure and remove from a committee a distinguished member of the House of Representatives with no due process at all. I reject this. I hope the whole body will reject this, just like I voted and spoke against removing George Santos, a Republican on the other side of the aisle, because he had gotten no due process. I hope all of our colleagues will reject this absurd rush to judgment and attempt to change the subject here. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, before I yield time to my good friend Louisiana, Representative Raskin, I will be careful in my remarks. You need to be careful with your facts. You have an 11-year veteran of this body who should know better. You have an 11-year member of this body who took money. It wasn't a newspaper article. It was a fact. She took money from Jeffrey Epstein. It's ironic that you're taken up by defending Ms. Plaskett, which is going to the Ethics Committee, but she's lost her willingness or lost her ability to serve because she got irrational judgment by taking money from a convicted pedophile of young children. And it's unfathomable that you're taking the position that you are. These are facts. You mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell. She's not a sitting member of Congress. She, as a sitting member of Congress, she has relinquished any sense of duty to serve on these committees. With that, I want to yield as much time as needed for my good friend Louisiana, Mr. Clay Higgins.
And the chair would remind all members to please avoid engaging in personalities to direct all comments to the chair. The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
I thank my colleague, Mr. Norman from South Carolina, and I thank my colleague, Mr. Raskin, for the salient points that he has brought to this debate. I also defended George Santos on this floor and opposed the means by which he was expelled. I think it was beyond the pale, and this is a responsibility that we bear in this body, is to determine the means by which our colleagues shall be reprimanded or disciplined. And the Constitution is clear on this. My friend, Mr. Raskin, knows full well that this body controls the means by which and the rules by which the members of Congress shall be disciplined. So we've had variances of opinions regarding, the exact disciplinary actions that should be embraced or rejected, member by member. But let me say that in this case, Ms. Plaskett's receiving text messages, this was so alarming to me. When I saw this and read it, I didn't believe it. I say to my friend, I thought perhaps it was media from a satirical site. It couldn't possibly be true, because we all know that a text message, a text exchange is rather intimate in the realm of communications. And to pierce into an actual congressional hearing for a member of Congress to receive and respond to a text message during a hearing, that is quite familiar, is it not? And this was shocking to me, that a member of Congress would be exchanging text messages directly with Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, at which time he was being prosecuted federally by the first Trump administration. He had received some nature of a sweetheart deal back in 2007 and avoided federal prosecution by pleading no contest to some level of state prosecution, where he was sentenced, Mr. Speaker, to 13 months. My understanding, he did 11 months, and at the easiest time that could be done. He walked every day during the day on a work release program. So that sweetheart deal, let me say, should be looked at. And now, to my horror, who has come to light that should be looked at? What was her involvement? Was there some involvement then? She's a good lady from the Virgin Islands. Where did Jeffrey Epstein live? In the Virgin Islands. She was a constituent in 2019. Was she a friend in 2007? During her service to the DOJ, which my friend has brought up, was there any interactions? These are the questions we have. The good lady from the Virgin Islands has crossed the threshold of reasonable suspicion, and therefore she should be investigated. During said investigation by ethics, and I would recommend by DOJ, and I would recommend by oversight and judiciary committees. Meanwhile, she should absolutely be removed from the House Select Committee on Intel. This, Mr. Speaker, is my position. I presented without note for the betterment of the debate of this body, and I yield my time back to the gentleman from South Carolina.
I reserve.
From South Carolina, the gentleman from South Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to hear my friend from Louisiana. Both of the Republican speakers have said this demands an ethics investigation. I think Mr. Higgins just said it should be investigated by oversight and by judiciary, as well as by ethics, as well as by others. This resolution censures her and punishes her before there's been 1 day of investigation. There's been no investigation at all. That was the whole burden of the minority whip's amendment. It was to say, let's have an investigation, refer it to the Ethics Committee. That's why the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana and I both voted against, and we got a majority to vote against censuring or expelling even George Santos without any ruling by our ethics disciplinary body. Isn't that putting the cart before the horse? I don't get it. I wish one of you could explain that to us, why we should censure her before there's been 1 day of actual investigation. If being on the phone with one of our constituents, even an evil, sinister force like Jeffrey Epstein, and of course, he has said that he considered Donald Trump the most evil person he ever met. He said, without a redeeming bone in his body. So I agree, people can say different things, but Jeffrey Epstein, to me, disgraced himself. But in any event, people want to know, well, what were the contents of that conversation? Why was Ms. Plaskett doing that? I'm sure she's got a good explanation. We're talking about a distinguished lawyer and federal prosecutor who was in the middle of a hearing, which is something that members do all the time, is to talk to people in hearings about different things. But let me ask, if it's now the standard that just to be on a phone call with somebody establishes guilt by association, what about all the members of this body or of the U.S. Senate who were on the phone with January 6th insurrectionists and President Trump and his associates who were trying to block the certification of the election as people were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence"? A lot of phone calls, a lot of traffic going on. In fact, that's why our Republican colleagues dealt themselves $1 million cash payoff bonanza provision in the most recent Republican spending bill. They put that in there because their phone records had been subpoenaed lawfully by a grand jury. They were treated like every other American citizen because their names came up as potentially being involved in that conspiracy to somehow shut down proceedings in the House and the Senate. Now, are we saying just because they were on a phone call, they're guilty of something, we should strip them of their committee assignments? We should censure them? Have we gotten to that point? I mean, come on. This is the House of Representatives of the United States of America. Let's stick by the Constitution. Let's stick by due process. Let's go through the rules. I yield 5 minutes to my distinguished colleague from Connecticut, Representative Himes.
The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Maryland. I'm not going to speak today about Jeffrey Epstein or January 6th. I'm going to confine my remarks to two things that I know about. And I'm going to take a deep breath right now Because to stand here and to have to listen to the gentleman from Louisiana in the guise of just asking questions, besmirch one of the finest members I have had the honor of serving with, I would think would offend the sensibility of anybody in this chamber. But I'm going to limit my remarks to two things I know very well. Number one, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and what we need to do to preserve that very special environment. And number two, the character of Delegate Stacey Plaskett. On HPSCI, I've served for 10 years. And with Chairman Turner and now with Chairman Crawford, we have fought for that decade to keep the Select Committee on Intelligence immunized from the sewage that flows through this chamber, the partisan attacks, the hideousness. And by and large, we've been pretty successful, with one exception, when that committee got involved in the political investigation around Ukraine in the first Trump administration. Every single day, the leaders of that committee work hard, establish friendships, and do the work we need to do to make sure that the toxicity and the sewage that we're hearing right now don't impinge the critical work of making sure that our intelligence communities are keeping Americans safe and not violating civil liberties and not doing things inconsistent with the desires and character of the American people. This effort, put forward by a bunch of people who haven't served on that committee and who have no idea the comity and the grace with which that committee serves, you, sirs, will hurt this committee badly. And I expect every Republican on the Intelligence Committee, and I'll say it again, I expect every Republican on the Intelligence Committee who know Ms. Plaskett and who know the committee to vote no on the idea that without evidence and without due process, Ms. Plaskett should be removed from that very special committee. This resolution would strike a devastating blow to HPSCI's ability to work effectively by removing a member in good standing based on a newspaper article about text. No due process, no evidence, nothing offered other than a newspaper article which has moved the gentleman from South Carolina, a member who is consistently engaged in a bipartisan and productive way with the committee's work, to make some unrelated political statement will do profound damage to this essential committee. Now, let me just talk for a moment about Ms. Plaskett. I've served in this institution for 17 years, longer, I think, than most people in this chamber. And I have not had the honor of serving with somebody with the integrity and the commitment and the hard-working bona fides as Ms. Plaskett. We can argue about the wisdom or the judgment associated with those texts. I'm told that apparently Mr. Epstein was a constituent. But on any one of us, our worst day, our biggest misjudgment is not to be judged without any due process, especially in the context of this superb member, this critical member of the Intelligence Committee. The result of this resolution, if it were to pass, will be to undo the efforts of the Republican Speaker and the Republican Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Crawford, to restore the committee to what it was intended to be. And while the bill for that decision won't come due immediately, it will come due over time in the form of a less accountable and less effective intelligence community with less effective oversight for Congress. So I don't expect the gentlemen who have offered this up to back down now, but I do expect every single member of the Intelligence Committee, that elect those few who understand what it is we need to do, to close the door on the flow of partisan sewage which we see now threatening the critical work that we do. Vote no on this appalling resolution. I yield back.
We reserve.
The gentleman from Connecticut yields back to the gentleman from Maryland. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, can I inquire about how much time we have left?
2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes?
22 and a half
22
minutes.
and a half minutes.
Yes, sir.
Let me just say, for my good friends on the left, you know, we're hearing words. That's all this is, words. You're taking the side of a young lady who should have known better. She served for 11 years. She disparaged herself. She did it to herself. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is actual text that pretty well indicts Ms. Plaskett. Would she probably take it back? Yes, but it's too late now. I want to yield as much time as needs to be consumed by my good friend from Texas, Chip Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the gentleman from South Carolina. I thank him for bringing forward this important resolution before the body. I do want to say I appreciate the gentleman from Maryland, his commentary about the vote on removal and his considered judgment with respect to Santos, and I agreed with him at the time and made the same points. I want to align myself with the remarks from the gentleman from Louisiana, but I want to note in doing so, and I think the gentleman from Maryland has shown respect to, I think, the judgment of the gentleman from Louisiana about his being the sole vote on the issue before this body before with respect to what we're making public because of the gentleman's, I think, very real concerns about what it might mean for victims. And we had that debate and a colloquy back and forth in the Judiciary Committee a few hours ago about what we can do to ensure victims are protected and so forth as we all go forward in what I believe is a unanimous view that we should go seek out truth and justice here with respect to Epstein and anybody associated with him and them and the nefarious affairs involving Jeffrey Epstein. The reason that I support this resolution is, and I would note that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they could have tabled this resolution. They chose not to table it. They chose to refer it, which suggests to me that there's a recognition that something here is not particularly good, that we've got a sitting member, in this case the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands, who was sitting in the Oversight Committee. And I'm actually a particular interest here because I was the one doing the questioning. Apparently my questioning was so riveting that she was engaging in text messages back and forth at that moment. While I was questioning Mr. Cohen, the gentlelady was engaging in this back and forth on text messages with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, again, I've listened now for months. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle disparage and try to impugn the character of the President of the United States and other members of the administration in connection to an investigation of Jeffrey Epstein, which the President, his administration in 2019, they indicted Epstein. They actually moved forward and federally indicted him in 2019. Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested by the Trump administration. And I know the gentleman from Maryland will go on to say that the Biden administration then carry forward that arrest and indictment into prosecution. True. But it was, in fact, the Trump administration that did what had not been done for a long period of time by taking forward that indictment. So I've been listening to all of the preaching by my friends on the other side of the aisle about how any association, anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein is somehow the dispositive moment here in terms of determining the character of this administration or what they're doing or not doing when they're leaning in to try to seek the truth. Where tens of thousands of pages have been released by Jamie Comer and 13 subpoenas has all been put out. So now the House just voted to have greater transparency. Time will tell what that means in terms of what the court does and how they deal with grand jury secrecy and what they do to continue to redact and protect victims' names under existing laws and how the courts treat that. That's going to be a process, as the gentleman likely knows, right? This is going to be determined as to what gets released and how. But here we have the gentlelady sitting in the Oversight Committee texting with a known convicted felon, a convicted pedophile that was very public and known, had served jail time, and is engaging not just in texts that were trivial, but texts involving advice about her questioning of Michael Cohen, all designed to figure out how to get Michael Cohen to be able to somehow go after Trump or Trump's advisors or people around the president. That, to me, is what we talk about with censure, which is contemplated, of course, in our rules and in the structure. The gentleman talked about the Constitution. We're not removing her. We're simply saying censure. And we're saying that it is a censurable conduct to say that this individual sitting on a committee taking advice from a known convicted pedophile, convicted felon, that is conduct unbecoming of a member of the United States Congress and engaging in real time, taking advice from someone that we've been listening to being lectured to, is someone deserving of all of the scorn of the entire world, and he is. That's why we're here. If my colleagues didn't think this was a concern, they would have simply made a motion to table. But my colleagues decided to refer it to committee because they know this is a problem. They know this is not the kind of conduct you want in a member of this body. So I think that the gentleman from South Carolina is right to have brought this forward. I think that the body should hear this debate, and tonight that we should vote tonight to censure and refer to the Ethics Committee for further consideration. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from South Carolina.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my friend from Texas for those remarks. I'm afraid all of them dance around the central issue, which is the good congressman knows how due process works in America. There are facts that are adduced first. There's an opportunity to be heard on both sides. There's due process, there's consideration, then there's judgment. You've flipped the whole thing on its head. You've said we're going to judge her guilty before anybody has an opportunity even to hear what the charges are, much less answer the charges, much less do any kind of analysis. I'm sorry to hear that the text exchange that it seems to be at the heart of people's consternation here took place during the distinguished gentleman's questioning, but that is not a federal offense, nor is it an ethical violation in the House of Representatives. You don't get to have the undivided attention of all of your colleagues. The gentleman says that he thinks that our position is that any association with Jeffrey Epstein is a dispositive moment of judgment for people. That's not the position we've advanced. We've taken the position with the survivors that we want to end the cover-up of what happened and then let the chips fall where they may. If there are people who were actually engaged in crime, as Ghislaine Maxwell was, as Epstein was, then they should be charged with every element of due process. If they happen to be a waiter or a waitress who worked at an event, they're not guilty of anything. That's what due process is. We're able to sift through and figure it out. But your rush to judgment isn't even giving anybody a chance to know what the charges are here. It's the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. I'm going to yield now to Delegate Plaskett herself, the distinguished representative from... Oh, I'm sorry. First, we've got Representative Crockett from Texas for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. This is a distraction to take away from the fact that the guardians of pedophiles is literally trying to protect pedophiles. The president is a convicted felon and an accused sex offender. Stacey Plaskett hasn't been accused of either. So what are we actually here talking about? Trump and Epstein were besties. We've all seen the pictures of them. We saw the birthday book. So why are y'all more interested in talking about Stacey Plaskett than Trump's relationship with the man? When did y'all become so moral? Because I can remember when y'all wouldn't sign the discharge petition. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to vote for this, but you wouldn't sign the discharge petition. Until we decide that we are going to go after the actual rapists and pedophiles, miss me with your moral high ground. Folks who also took money from somebody named Jeffrey Epstein, as I had my team dig in very quickly. Mitt Romney, the NRCC, Lee Zeldin, George Bush, Win Red, McCain Palin, Rick Lazio. I just want to be clear. If this is the standard that we're going to make, just know we're going to expose it all. And just know that the FEC filings, they are available for everybody to review. This is absolutely ridiculous. You decide that you want to punish a sitting member of Congress because you are concerned about her text messages. Well, maybe you should be more concerned about those sex tapes that we still haven't gotten access to. Maybe you should be more concerned with the fact that the president, his name is mentioned in the files way more than Stacey Plaskett's name. Listen, I'm not saying that anything is right or wrong, but listen, if you're trying to figure out what's going on with somebody that's a criminal, then you maybe need to talk to their associates. That's exactly why maybe she was getting text messages. I'm not saying she was or wasn't. But considering the fact that they were talking to another associate of the president's and maybe she needed intel, you'd have to go talk to somebody that maybe knows what he's up to.
Time has expired.
We reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Speaker, I recognize my good friend from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
How much time is the gentleman recognized? How much time? Time you've allotted the gentleman from Arizona?
How much time do we have left?
The gentleman has 17 minutes remaining.
As much time as the gentleman may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Norman. Thank you for raising this issue. This to me, this is an interesting issue because I'm hearing the argument is coming at us and it says, well, you know, there's no due process. Well, debate is a part of due process. That's part of due process, is to have this debate. You get to stand up, get to defend, and get to raise your issues. And you chose to take it back to committee, which, as Mr. Roy said, that kind of indicates that maybe you know that there's something that's not great about this. So I'm looking at this, and here's at least one of the exchanges that seems to have taken place. And maybe we'll hear some comment about it. That'd be good. You can make some comment about it. But in this exchange, Mr. Epstein sent a text message to the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, and this is the quote. He brings up Rona, keeper of the secrets. And who's he referring to? Rona Graff. That's a Trump assistant. And Plaskett responds, Rona, ? Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym? So she wants to know what Mr. Epstein wants her to talk about. Don't you find that interesting? I find that really intriguing, especially since we know what Mr. Epstein was. And Epstein responds, that's his assistant. Doesn't really say much more than that. And then Plaskett starts questioning Mr. Cohen and asks about Graff. So not only was she texting, having this communication with Mr. Epstein, she's asking Mr. Cohen what Mr. Epstein wants her to ask. Another text says, from Epstein, good work. That's after she wraps it up. All of this seems to be very interesting, and I'm sorry, I don't breathe the rarefied air of the Intelligence Committee. I don't. I'm just a regular guy and a member of the House. That's all. So I don't know about that rarefied air, and I guess I'm part of the sewage. That Mr. Himes said. Yeah. Thanks for agreeing with me, Ms. Plaskett. So she's got us down. Unless you're in the Intelligence Committee, you're crap. That's what the Intel Committee says. But here's the deal. When you're sitting there in a sitting committee and you're having communications with a convicted sex offender, and you're taking their advice on how to ask questions, maybe you got a problem. Maybe your problem is that you've brought disrepute on the House. And this isn't from the articles. This is from the 10,000 pages or so released last week from the Oversight Committee that they received from the Epstein estate. This isn't fishing around. This is coming from real evidence. So I sit here and I listen. Oh, you know, she's the finest member that ever walked the planet, man. That's what you heard. But the bottom line is this. She's sitting there seeking advice and counsel on how to ask questions from Jeffrey Epstein, who this entire body, save one, just condemned. And we want all the evidence. And it's a shame to be here, but for one thing, you made the choice. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm encouraging everyone in this body to support Mr. Norman's resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman of South Carolina reserves. The members are reminded to direct their commentary to the chair. Before I recognize the gentleman from Maryland, please remind yourself, as well as the members, to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. Does the gentleman seek recognition?
Yes, I do.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much. I want to remark that yet one more member says we should go ahead and censure her, and then we should do a complete investigation. I think any fifth grader in America knows that's the exact opposite of what due process means in America. We don't punish people before we have investigation and the opportunity to be heard. I yield 6 minutes now to the distinguished gentlelady from Virgin Islands, Representative Plaskett.
Thank you so much to Mr. Raskin, to my former professor in law school, and I want to address the body. I first want to give you all a sense of what was happening that day. Everyone knows at that hearing in February, the entire country was watching. As Michael Cohen decided he was going to finally give up information about what was happening in the Trump world, the Trump enterprise. And at the beginning of that hearing, the ranking member, Jim Jordan, had the disrespect to Elijah Cummings, may he rest in peace and his name be a memory, after not allowing Mr. Jordan to shut the committee hearing down. And I turned to Mr. Jordan and told him to have respect for the chair and to basically shut up. And that moment went viral. And I began to get innumerable texts from friends, from foes, from constituents about what was happening in that hearing. And I got a text from Jeffrey Epstein, who at the time was my constituent, who was not public knowledge at that time that he was under federal investigation, and who was sharing information with me. Now, I heard recently from someone that I was seeking advice from him. Let me tell you something. I don't need to get advice on how to question anybody from any individual. I have been a lawyer for 30 years. I have been a narcotics prosecutor in New York City. I have had the honor of being a political appointee at the Justice Department after September 11th as a Republican appointee in the Bush administration. I know how to question individuals. I know how to seek information. I have sought information from confidential informants, from murderers, from other individuals, because I want the truth, not because I need them to tell me what to say. And if you look at the transcript, you will see that I questioned Michael Cohen for 5 minutes. The Washington Post only shows you 30 seconds and takes from it one individual's name that I got from Jeffrey Epstein and didn't know who the individual was, and put that individual with a host of other individuals that I felt the committee should subpoena. They've never been subpoenaed. They've never been questioned. Because at the end of the day, I know that in the Trump administration and with my colleagues over there, it's not about sexual assault. It's not about support of victims. It's about money. It is about money. I have consistently stood against sexual violence and the exploitation of women and children in previous careers as well as here in this body. We all know that Jeffrey Epstein's actions were absolutely reprehensible. As a constituent, as an individual who gave donations to me, when I learned of the extent of his actions after his investigation, I gave that money to women's organizations in my community. Not back to him, but to women in the community who needed that support. That's what I think should have been done, and that's what I did. They've taken a text exchange which shows no participation, no assistance, no involvement in any illegal activity, and weaponized it for political theater, because that's what this is. This has been reviewed by federal courts. Any charges, victims who initially had a case against me dismissed it on their own without prejudice. You don't want to talk about what is really happening here. Your attacks on working families, your protection of powerful predators and corporate criminals. You want to talk about texting felons? How often do you text President Donald J. Trump? That's the individual we should be concerned about. And let me tell you this. I am not going to support the wealthy and connected who continue to exploit workers and evade taxes, powerful figures with credible allegations who face no consequences, and corporate interests profiting from human suffering while families struggle. And let me tell the people of the Virgin Islands.
Gentleman will state his point of order.
The point of order is you may not call the President of the United States a felon. That is a violation.
Point of order is under consideration, and we're not going to lose order here either, so please.
May I continue? May I continue, Mr.
Members
Speaker?
are, however, reminded to refrain, as mentioned a little while ago, from making personality commentary towards the President. The point of order is not timely, so the gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is happening here? I feel sorry for my colleagues. I feel sorry for this body. I see members coming and speaking against me who I've never even had a conversation with. You don't know me. You don't know the work that I've done. You don't know the support that I've given to families, to individuals, to support people. I worked a full-time job with children under the age of 5, going to school, law school at night. Do you think I would risk my law degree for any individual?